The O2F Football Podcast. The voices of tomorrow, here today.
Hey guys, welcome back to the O2F Football Podcast. I'm Nathan. I'm joined today by Ollie and Kieran.
You alright?
Hello.
Today we are talking about Liverpool's poor season so far and whether Fulham have enough to stay up. Let's get into it.
First up, we're going to talk about Liverpool. The current champion season hasn't gone to plan so far, and Klopp last week said that their title chances are over. But where has it all gone wrong? Nathan, what do you think?
Well, it's hard to talk about Liverpool and not talk about the Virgil van Dijk injury and what that's meant for Liverpool this season. And alongside when you lose your best defender, sort of the worst thing that could probably happen is losing your second and third best defender and all your defenders, all your centre-backs, which happened to Liverpool with Joe Gomez getting injured on international duty and Matip has just been non-stop injured. It seems he comes back for a game, then just gets injured again. He had a really bad one. I forgot what game it was, but a bad injury. And it's affected the team in a weird way because Liverpool's defence was already sort of in question after obviously the Aston Villa game where they lost 7-2. And then, so it was always like, this team's going to give away chances. Now it's a makeshift back four. Oh God, what this is, Liverpool going to concede so many goals. But in the end, actually, the defence wasn't the biggest problem. Fabinho stepped in and made a big impact in defence. Not really surprised a lot of people, but just did better, generally better than everyone expected. Obviously, Matip was semi-fit at the time, so he was staying in there as a bit of a partnership being formed. And Henderson sort of did quite well at the back. Reece Williams had emerged, and Nathaniel Phillips, I think, on his first game got man of the match. So it wasn't looking too bad. But the problem has been, really, for me, it's been the midfield and the creativity side of things. Liverpool are very reliant on Mo Salah at the minute for goals. And while he's been fantastic, he can't just rely on Mo Salah. Firmino's not really been at it for the last year and a half. Mane's really not been at it this season. Obviously, we're talking about this game after the Leipzig one where Mane was scored and was slightly better than he has been. But the Liverpool have really struggled attacking wise. It's that big goal drought at Anfield too. And so in general for me, it's been a weird mixture. It's the defence has been the problem, like the reason why we're at fault for a lot of things. But it's also affected us in a really weird way. I think it's because you have Henderson and Fabinho in there and you take out our two best midfielders. Then we're playing with a technically second string midfield, and I think that's been the problem this season.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with that. To be fair, I think it's been down to a lot of things really from what I've seen, and it's just the unfortunate state of last season. It seemed like every player in the starting 11 was at the top of their game and very much in form, and now it seems like every single player at some point has had a dip in form. I think, Alexander-Arnold's probably a good example of that, of someone who is on their day a fantastic footballer and fullback. But we've seen stats recently of the highest amount of ball giveaways in Premier League games, and I think Alexander-Arnold's the top three for all of them. So he struggled a bit there with some distribution areas which maybe he didn't struggle with last season. And as you mentioned there, I think when you sign a player like Thiago, you can't almost not put him in the starting team. And I think Liverpool have almost tried too hard to accommodate him to the point where it's affecting other areas of the pitch. And I have no doubt that we'll see the best of Thiago at some point. It just feels like right now that the balance in that midfield isn't quite there, as you're having to play arguably your two most natural defensive midfielders when they're fit in the back line. So it's creating a weird balance in midfield, and I think a lot of the time the players who are in there are unsure as to what their roles may actually be, because you're missing out on that balance. And it seems like Mo Salah's goals are ever more crucial than they were beforehand, as it felt like everyone was chipping in, and Salah and Firmino and Mane created that deadly trio. It now feels like those players have gone through their dips in form, where beforehand you always felt like when it was 0-0 in a Liverpool game, they would eventually break down the team. I think one I remember mostly was I think Sheffield United. This was quite a while ago.
With the Henderson mistake.
The game where Wijnaldum, well, it might have been Cardiff a few seasons ago.
I think Wijnaldum, when he scored that goal, and it was like a real howler from Henderson.
Yeah,
We just
so
never looked
it's
like
moments
scoring.
like that where you always think there's just that one last chance left. Mane against Norwich, I think, is a good one as well. And you always felt like they were going to get that goal. And now it seems like it's almost been in reverse, where Liverpool are pressing and on top, but they just can't break that low block as well as they once could. And they almost get caught napping at the back, as we saw with the Burnley game, and probably with the Leicester game as well, become a bit too complacent, and the mistakes start to come in that, you don't associate with the Liverpool team. And I think it's obviously down to the facts of things like you mentioned with the injuries. It just seems like everything has kind of gone against them. And it's not a case of defending them because, every team has injuries. Every team does have injuries, but I think it's very different when you lose 3 central defenders for a long time. So, I mean, for me, it's down in a lot of areas, and I think probably the knock-on effect of having no defenders and playing midfielders in the back line is real crucial to what's kind of gone wrong.
A lot of people have been obviously saying that issues with Liverpool has been the defensive injuries, and obviously I'm not going to deny that that's going to have a huge impact on their team and the performances they have. But a lot of people have been saying, and I've just looked at the stats, and to be fair, it is, if you look at it, they've conceded only 1 goal more than Manchester United, who are in second place. And obviously that can highlight Man United's difficulties in defence when Liverpool's basically conceding the same amount with basically all their first team centre-backs out injured. But is that really the main excuse then, that they're in 6th, whereas Man United are in 2nd? And also, if you look, they've actually scored 1 goal less than top of the table and most likely going to be champions, Man City. So not scoring goals, they're scoring basically the same as first place team. And they're only conceding 1 more than the second place team. So can you just put it down to the injuries in defence?
I think so. A lot of it does come down to that due to, as I say, the 2 midfielders dropping deep. You can't ignore the fact this sort of form stems from that long goal drought we went on from in December sort of period where we just couldn't buy a goal. And before we played Tottenham, West Ham, and we managed to get some really impressive victories. But Liverpool have struggled creatively, and I do genuinely think it's down to not really having a proper holding midfield. I think Wijnaldum's a very impressive player, a good player to have in that fight, especially in that 6, or especially when we're playing sort of teams that like to press. That he was very good against Leipzig, I thought, in the game that happened recently. But Henderson is a player that gets the team forward in a way that not many other teams do. He's got a great, cross-field pass. And while Thiago's been very, very good, I'm very impressed by Thiago quite often when I watch him, but he's just seemingly not been the perfect match so far. I do think a lot of that does come down to that, as Kieran was mentioning, the lack of balance in the team in midfield. And I think that stems from the injuries. But obviously also you cannot excuse poor form. Firmino's poor form isn't down to injuries. Mane's poor form's not down to injuries. Trent's poor form not down to injuries. Maybe he's got a little less protection from inside when he had Joe Gomez, but there's been some players that just haven't really been good enough this season. And it seems like whenever Liverpool look like they're going to get back on track, they get knocked down again. The West Ham performance, second half against West Ham, was really impressive. And then if you want to go to the Leicester game, the first 75 minutes of that game, Liverpool looked like the team they were. They looked like the champions of the Premier League, which is something we've not really been saying recently. And then 10 minutes later, they were 3-1 down, and defensive mistakes and just a lack of confidence. I think confidence has been a real issue, and confidence in creative areas. A lot of the time against Burnley and Brighton, Liverpool just look to lump the ball into the box with Trent and Robertson. And then it's like, do you realise who we're playing? We're playing Burnley and Brighton, tallest teams in the league, and we're trying to lump the ball into the box, hoping, Firmino or Origi can win a header. So it's just strange to me. And as a Liverpool fan, it's frustrating. It does seem like a lack of a plan B, as well as, so for me, it's the injuries, lack of balance, and a lack of plan B when things aren't really going right in attacking areas, which wasn't something we said last season. Liverpool always had that sort of plan B, or just plan A was so good. So the lack of plan B has hurt us this season for sure.
What about the goalkeeping situation though with Alisson? Obviously, you have to talk about him. He made several errors recently. He's had 3 errors leading to a goal, which is joint top for the worst this season, compared to what many people are having a dig at De Gea recently for Man United, with his only 1 error leading to a goal. So you know, it's not just the centre-backs, is it? Alisson, who was supposedly the best goalkeeper in the Premier League, a lot of people were saying last season, just isn't going right. So how can an entire team all of a sudden just capitulate?
You don't become a bad goalkeeper in 2 games. Those 3 errors leading to goals, I'm pretty certain all 3 of them are from the last 2 games, Man City and Leicester. He's had an off day. He's had 2 bad days. Yeah, it's hard. You know, when a striker goes out of form, the impact's less. When a midfielder goes out of form, the impact's less. When a defender goes out of form, the impact's less. When a goalkeeper goes out of form, you're more likely to concede some goals. That's just how it works. That's just how it happens. So Alisson's just had a few off days. Alisson had such a great impact on the Liverpool team. And as frustrating it is to see him concede, you know, stupid goals, like when he passed the ball to Man City twice and then rushing out of goal for no reason against Leicester. He's still, for me, the best keeper in the league. I think he proved that against Leipzig. I know it's not in the league, but his performances again in that game, it just generally is quite good. So you don't become a bad goalkeeper overnight. And I think those 2 games are the reason he's the reason we lost to Man City, and he was a part of the reason we lost to Leicester. It wasn't the whole reason why we lost to Leicester. Just, you know, 2 bad days at the office. I'm sure he'll be back. Going from the champions to the relegation zone, and Fulham have been a side that have been really resurgent as of late. Scott Parker seemingly has got his team playing to a new level, a level we didn't really expect from their promotion to the Premier League last season. And with Newcastle's deteriorating form, do they have a chance of completing the impossible here?
Well, I think out of the 3 who you probably expect to go down from Fulham, Sheffield United and West Brom, I think Fulham definitely have the best chance. It almost seems now that Fulham and Newcastle swap places in terms of having a goal scorer. Josh Maja came in on loan from Bordeaux, scored twice on his first Premier League start. Meanwhile, Callum Wilson has been ruled out for, I think, about 2 months, roughly, for Newcastle, and he's been pivotal recently. Quite ironically, most recently, his 2 goals against Everton at Goodison Park, the exact same scoreline that Fulham had most recently. So it's funny how that's worked out. But, you know, I always say that if you want to stay in the Premier League, you need to have someone that will get you between 10 to 15 goals at minimum. Because as Michael Owen would probably say, goals win you games. And it's just quite a simple factor of that, I think. And that game against Everton was a real indication, I think, of how resurgent Fulham can be. Everton were, don't get me wrong, terrible. It didn't help having Sigurdsson and James Rodriguez. There wasn't a lot of pace in the midfield for Everton, and I think that's where they really struggled when you had the people in the engine room, you know, the likes of Harrison Reed and Anguissa and Loftus-Cheek dropping deep, who just run and run and run. And it wasn't necessarily a smash and grab result. I think Fulham comfortably deserved that victory. On the wing side of things with Kenny Tete was magnificent. Anthony Robinson cleared everything that came towards him. And, you know, you can't not mention the goals that Josh Maja scored. Yes, they were tap-ins, but, you know, I think one of the oldest tricks or sayings in the books is you've got to be in the right place to finish them. And he seemed to have his positioning perfectly down, and he knew exactly where to be at the right times. And I think if Fulham can play more often like that, then absolutely they can stay up, and I think they deserve to stay up. It's a very brave and expansive way of playing football, and it's not necessarily what you'd expect from a team who've just been promoted. And that initial first season, the goal is always to stay in the Premier League by any means necessary. But to do it in the manner that they would do it, by playing that way, I think is extremely commendable. And I think, yes, there's a chance that if you play like that, you will be picked off. I think, you know, they tried to do that on the opening day of the season against Arsenal, and at times you will be heavily beaten. But I think more often than not, by playing that way, by playing the way you want to play, you've got a much better chance of winning games against, you know, those sides who maybe don't expect you to play like that way. You know, I think maybe a large part of fatigue from the 120 minutes played earlier in the week But I think a lot of changes were made, and I think a lot of players were rested. So regardless of the team Everton put out, you can't take away from what Fulham did. And I think, understandably, it's going to give them massive confidence going into their next few games.
I think one thing that surprised me a lot about Fulham, because I feel like they've generally been quite impressive any time I've seen them play. They've only won 3 times this season. That is that's not a lot. Not a lot of wins for a side that have seemingly actually been quite good and have a very good manager in Scott Parker. And I think the one thing I noticed from the game against Everton was it really feels like they're playing for Parker. I think he's a great talker. I think I've seen a few press conference interviews and stuff, the ones that get he has the ones that get turned into the street songs and all of that. But he's a really good talker. I feel like someone you can get behind. I think it was September, and Fulham hadn't quite recruited anyone, or anyone of necessary of note, or not enough. And then he kind of had a go at Tony Khan, the chairman sort of turned wrestler by the sounding of things. But then Tony Khan acted. He went, okay, I'm going to bring some players in, and then it seems like the players have reacted to him. And I think they'd probably be higher in the league if it wasn't for that horrible missed penalty streak that they had, and some general bad performance. That's going to happen. But then you look at Newcastle. Do you think Newcastle are in real trouble now of going down?
Well, I think you have to now look at Alan St-Maximin. He's going to be a player to take them to that next level. I'm not sure what Ollie thinks, but from watching Newcastle, it's not looking too good.
I mean, Wilson's out injured, which is going to be a massive blow for him. He's out for quite a while. But before we go on to Newcastle, I just want to say something on Fulham. Everyone's saying about how they're rejuvenating and stuff like this, but they've got 7 points out of a possible 24 this year, starting from January onwards. Are they just being a bit overhyped? They've got 1 win this year so far. Do you think that maybe people are getting a bit ahead of themselves? I mean, it's not that big of a total income of points from 8 games, 7 points. Everyone's saying that they're going to stay up, but maybe is it just because they've been so bad that they're now just doing okay?
I think when you're down in the relegation zone, that's actually quite a high total of points in the grand scheme of things. So maybe it is slightly overhyped. I think the performance that they put in certainly merited the praise that they got. But you look at West Brom and Sheffield United, and they're probably down there with maybe 3 or 4 points from those. And at the bottom of the league, 3 points makes a massive, massive difference. And there's an emerging gulf now between 4 teams down the bottom and the remaining teams that are trying to maybe push for the mid-table spot. So I think you have to, when a relegation team gets 3 points, it's arguably much bigger than when a team in the mid-table area or pushing for the top 6 get those wins, because it makes a huge difference. And you can't guarantee that, on the precipice of things, if you look at a game between, for example, Chelsea and Newcastle, you think, well, Chelsea will win. You look at a game between Everton and Fulham, going off form and the type of players they've got, you'd think Everton would win. So when they don't win, I think that's when it adds to the shock value and maybe where it does get slightly overhyped.
I was going to say, I mean, I know what you mean. And points obviously always on the line, and they desperately need them when you're in a relegation battle. But I just think everyone's been going on about them so much that you just feel like, I think it comes across that they're doing better than they are. But going back to your original question in terms of Newcastle, I think they're definitely in a relegation battle. I think, obviously, if Fulham do start to pick up points, like we just said, then, yeah, they definitely need to be looking over their shoulder at Fulham, trying to catch them up, especially with their goal scorer and Wilson being ruled out for quite a while. I can't remember exactly how long, but I think it's bigger than many people thought at first, him to be out for. So, yeah, it's going to be a huge knock to their, staying in the league's chances. And, I mean, the next game's Manchester United, and then they've got Wolves, and then they've got West Brom. So, after Man United, they've got a kind of what you just think would be opportunities to pick up points against Wolves, who haven't been great this season. Then obviously West Brom being down in the relegation zone. So if they can pick up points against the teams around them, you'd think they have a good chance. But without Wilson, where are they going to score?
Yeah, I think that's the real problem. Even when they had Wilson, the way they would go about certain games would, you'd not think they were in a relegation battle at all. I think The game against Everton, they took it to them. The game against Southampton, they took it to them, and they won. And you just think that, you know, it almost seems like there's no authority or insurgence or resilience or anything like that Newcastle are even aware they're in a relegation battle. They kind of just look like they're teetering in mid-table, and I think they really need to start showing with how they play that, oh crap, we are where we are, and if we don't do something soon, it's going to be a lot worse. And I think that's where the biggest worry for me comes in, is the mentality and the mindset of the players. In that Fulham look full of confidence and Newcastle look devoid of any belief.
I mean, we said for so long at the start of the season, and when we started going through the podcast, that the bottom three are cemented, that they're going to be what they are. And a couple of weeks back, we were saying maybe it's Sheffield United that could escape. But for so long, we were saying it's such a certainty of who's going down. And now, as we come into the last, section of the season, we're talking about maybe Newcastle getting down. So I think that just shows how unpredictable this season really has been, including at the top of the table.
And that wraps up the 1-2 Football podcast. Thanks for listening. Before you go, make sure to check out our Facebook at 1-2 Football and Twitter and Instagram all at 1-2 Football UK. And take a look at 12football.com for all the latest written pieces from our growing list of contributors from around the world. We'll be back next week.